Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinema Wave podcast. We are covering Robert Eggers' new movie, Nosferatu, the standout epic that we have been anticipating this entire year. I have been dying to talk about this movie with everybody here, and I am one of your hosts for today. My name is Zach Miller. I'm here with Liz Seiko.
Hello, very excited.
And I'm here with Vinny Albano.
Hello, hello.
So what's going on, guys? I think that this movie was something we were all looking forward to. And based off of our opinions off camera, we all really liked the film. So Liz, do you want to give us your first impressions of the movie?
Yes. So going into this film, I had already put this, I'm pretty sure, in my top 5 most anticipated of the year, just because of Eggers' past work and the cast. And then I also kind of just love this genre of I don't know, gothic romance horror, I would say is what it is, if you're going to get very specific. And I was so excited that I came out really loving this film. I think it's in my top 5 of the year after just one first viewing. For me, technically, it is a gorgeous film. Every shot looks like a picture. You could literally hit pause and there's so many different dynamics, just the shadowing, the coloring, the sound, the performances too. I mean, Lily-Rose Depp for me really in her past work, she's kind of let people down, especially with her most recent work on The Idol. And I think this was a huge staple in her career of making people aware of the talent that she has and the work that she's going to put into her roles. So yeah, I really love this film and I can't wait to talk into more detail about it with you guys.
Yeah.
Vinny, what do you think coming out of it?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I loved it. I think that I was very anticipated for it, because I loved all of Eggers' previous work. I'm coming from honestly a very biased point of view because Eggers makes films that are literally perfect for me. I love The Lighthouse, I love The Northman, I love The Witch, and I was once again, I think he delivers here. I think that by far, like I said, he's one of my favorite working directors. His ability to just establish this haunting atmosphere amongst the period setting and his way of telling gothic fairy tales is so fascinating to me. From the visuals to his use of long takes and, like you mentioned, the performances he's able to conjure from the cast. It's incredible. It's incredible. Again, another collaboration with him and Willem Dafoe. And Willem Dafoe, again, delivers as this very wacky, eccentric man. Overall, I really loved Nosferatu. And also, as a fan of the originals, I think that this is among one of my favorite renditions of the story.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of what you were saying earlier too, Vinny, was we've seen Nosferatu done before, and I think with this movie, it was going to be how does it separate itself from the rest? And I feel like Robert Eggers is one of those prolific directors working right now who has an understanding of this gothic occult background and dark mysticism in all of his films. And there's just his body of work I'm so attracted to watching for how terrifying it can be and how there's no closure in a lot of his movies. He goes to deep dive dark places in almost all of his films so far. And he just has this really dark mysticism about his paths that he goes down. And when I heard that he was coming on to do this project, I was like, that fits perfectly because he has an understanding of what does it mean to visually represent evil in all of his movies or evil moments for characters. And it's just very unexplainable nature and stuff like that. So I loved when they juggle with the vampire and the plague and what that meant for that period to those people and how that was dark and terrible. And then he has the original Gothic flair and German expressionism of the original films. So he doesn't stray away from the original material, but he adds on it and he compounds this new visual style with the original stuff. So I think that was very cool, and that was very apparent just from the trailer. So I was really excited to see this. But do you guys want to talk about how the performances also contributed to that, and then some standout performers for you in the film?
Yeah, let's Vinny,
Yeah.
you want to go with your first
Yeah,
couple of thoughts?
I'm gonna start off the bat.
Hit us with it.
Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
god.
It's wild.
It is insane how he looks in the film, how he sounds in the film. That I think Orlok's design and overall image is my favorite part of this film, because they go really back to the roots of Dracula and this count in a castle, because Dracula is based off the real Romanian tyrant, or maybe yeah, he's pretty much a tyrant.
Yeah.
It's based off this real emperor who
Right.
had, dressed in this very Romanian type of gown and hat and the big old mustache, and they lean completely into that.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that. The mustache caught me off guard, but I liked it. I did. And his look, how he goes back to the roots of these, what vampires really were. We were talking off camera. He's a corpse in this film. He's an undead corpse. He's not this sly man with slicked back hair and Gary Oldman kind of seducing people. No, he is the embodiment of this disgusting man who once was, and the costume design from the makeup and Skarsgård's voice. I can't even replicate it. It's so perfect.
Yeah.
I was shocked because after I saw the film, I saw the note that they said that it's totally Bill doing the voice. It's not any like engineering on top of it or editing of the sound. And he said that the way he figured it out, he worked on it for like a few months of being able to get his voice to that level. And he was saying that he was doing like these almost like German native whale calls in order to like get deep in his gut and register. And it's just crazy that he's able to transform into he disappears in the character. Like for a second, I was like, is this really him, or is he, or like, is it such CGI and editing that he was just doing some like mannerism work? But yeah, if they didn't have him in this role, I don't know if it would have been as creepy and as horrifying, just because of even just in the small details, like the way that he's using his hands in the shadows to continue just the eeriness of it. Because obviously it's terrifying when you're seeing this corpse, as you said, Vinny, in a full frame. But like there's also just something even more terrifying of all of a sudden you see these shadows coming up around these characters that don't actually know what's going on, but us as the audience do. And so I think that the way they handled his character completely, Orlok, was beautifully stylized and done, and the makeup artists deserve all the awards.
Yeah. And I think he's like become one of these modern like Boris Karloff types where he can play a monster, and the makeup doesn't like lead him astray where he's just playing a monster. Like he adds a layer and complexity to it, even with Pennywise, and like everyone was so impressed with that and how he broke out for that role. I think like that's almost a dying art in itself, and you only see a few performers like that today, like Andy Serkis with the CGI, and how he's reinventing that as like a makeup trend, but also he's revisiting how can that help a character. And Bill is doing that practically with Pennywise, with Nosferatu now, and I thought he was such a good pick for this because he is so invisible in all of his roles. Like he's a true actor in that way. So he was definitely like one of the strongest parts of the movie, and for a title role, there's such a great ensemble as well. Like you have Lily-Rose Depp, who is putting it all out there. Like she's unbelievable in this movie. Willem Dafoe is so believable that this man, you feel like he has been to hell and back based off of what he's seen, and we didn't even have to see it on screen all the time. And you know,
Nicholas
Nicholas
Hoult.
Hoult is great. Like he is going through the waves,
All the emotions.
Like
He's
that man
in there.
been through it. Yeah. And I mean, Aaron Taylor Johnson. There's just such a great cast in this film. Do you want to talk
Corrin.
about Lily-Rose Depp too, and what you took away from her performance?
Yeah, and the same kind of thing that I was talking about Bill's is that she did all the physicality herself, and that they didn't have any CGI or any editing going on, which I think is just very impressive. And then also, again, adds to the element of horror, because sometimes when you're watching these horror films or like gothic kind of like exorcist movies, you start to see where the editing's coming in, and you're like, okay, that's not actually real, and like there's like the head spinnings aren't real. But I think because these were her real natural movements, it just added that whole element of like, oh no, her character is truly going through this, and the physical ailments that are happening are actually in her body. And so I think that them keeping it to that simplicity and not adding in another tech element really just grounded the film in a way. And I just loved her performance, because I think her character's arc is so clear, and you can really see the moments that her inner self is fighting like these actual demons that are inside her, and the moments that she's scared, and then moments that she's like flipped and the demons are coming out of her and are taking control of her body and her like mental state. Which is, it's hard. Not everybody can do those flips and make them look seamless and make them look real and honest. But I think she was perfectly cast in this too, because there's a little bit of like an innocence factor to her, which Ellen's character needed to just make it believable that she's actually being, it's then the whole conversation of like, is she being taken advantage of, or is she putting this on herself? And if she didn't have that innocence-ness to her, it wouldn't have been as believable.
Yeah, with Lily here, I remember reading that she took inspiration from Isabella Gianni's performance from Possession.
Oh, I bet.
I love that movie. I love that's one of my favorite horror performances of all time. And also, funny enough, Isabel Adjani played Ellen in the Nosferatu from the 70s.
Did she really? I did not know that. Yeah. Wow.
So I think it is a cool type of I can't find the word, but connection that kind of interweaves all of these films through multiple generations now, over 100 years now. Right. And however, love Lily, love Nicholas Hoult.
What didn't you love, Vinny?
This film made me realize that Aaron Taylor Johnson's overrated. Whoa!
Whoa. Okay, give us the thoughts. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
So all right. So I'm gonna all right. This is gonna be so controversial because I know people love
the letterbox people are typing right now.
They're coming for you.
Yeah. So Aaron Taylor Johnson, for me, I love the entire cast, and I don't think he's bad. Like he's good in this, but there were multiple moments where he felt more of a parody of the time period rather than really being in the time period. Especially when he is Anna Corrin plays
Emma.
Yeah.
Emma
so playing alongside Anna Corrin, she felt more in tune with the time period when I don't know, I just didn't find his
mannerisms,
his like delivery, or
just his overall ethos of this character believable. It almost felt like a parody of that time period, almost like he was hamming it up in a very Oscar Wilde type of way, you know.
Okay,
I do think like and I do agree. I think his character is like the least complex of everyone in the film, maybe next to Emma Corrin. But I think his stereotype was the rich, proper Englishman. Well, and he was, they're in, I think it's Germania. So he's probably like the class difference is very apparent from him and like Willem Dafoe and even Nicholas Hoult to a point. So I don't know if he was giving more of that Shakespearean cadence for that choice, but it could also be the fact that his character is not like as noteworthy as the others in the story. But I do think like he was giving off the idea that, oh, I am the secure, straightforward man in the house, and I gotta like take care of my family. And then when all hell breaks loose, it dissolves for him. So when he like goes to the grave at the one part of the movie, he it melts away for him, which I thought was the stronger part of the movie. I don't know if you agree with that. Did you see like less complexity with him, or was it just his delivery as an actor? Like you would have rather seen someone else do it?
Yeah, I think it's just his delivery as an actor.
Okay.
It just didn't. It felt like everyone else was outperforming him, and I don't know. Maybe it's weird because I'm a fan of the originals, and in the originals, that character is not expanded upon. Like that character is like, hey, Helen, you stay with him and his wife, and I don't even think they get a line of dialogue in either versions. In the Werner Herzog version, they barely get any lines of dialogue either. So this is definitely the most expanded upon those two characters have gotten. So I don't know, maybe it's this cognitive what's the word? I can't come. Oh, Jesus Christ, my psychology class is failing me right now. Cognitive dissonance. Yeah. So I don't know if it's that of having this character in mind of like the original, of like having it not expanded upon, and now seeing it in a way that maybe I didn't expect, but I think I'm just gonna draw the line of just like, yeah, no, he just, yeah.
I do have a thought on this then, because so I came out of it thinking he was the weakest in the cast as well, but I think it's because he was miscast. I think he's a little too charming for this role, and from what I take, correct me if I'm wrong, Vinny, but in the previous Nosferatu films, it's less sexual of a film, right? Like they don't touch on it as much, or if they do, it's more talked about. It's not necessarily shown, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that what Eggers was trying to do with this film was also have the overall arcing like theme of women's sexuality back in the time, of how if somebody was having like a female was having like any sort of sexual lust or like feelings at all, that they deemed it as she was insane, or that she was going through a fit of
like
some
demonic.
sort.
Yeah.
And that it was some sort of possession, or that she was just sick is what they would call it. And I think that Frederick Harding's character was kind of enhanced to take on that element a little bit more, to show that the men just saw Ellen's ailments as just, oh, well, she's sick because she's being sexual in her dreams and like she's having sexual feelings, so we need to shut this down. But because he's too charming of just a person in general, I think that kind of male like tyrancy wasn't there where it should have been, and it should have been a much more like I don't know, domineering force of him just being like, she's just a woman, like let's shut this down, and he didn't play into that at all.
To kind of expand on that too, I didn't feel like he was necessarily misogynistic to his wife or his children. There was the couple references though, to expand on what you're saying, of like when she's having her first encounters with the possession, they're like, oh, why'd you tie her down? Like, that we shouldn't be doing that. And then he was like, oh, well, I thought we should do that, you know? And then they were like, oh, no, you haven't liked her from the start. So this is her problem. This isn't like, yeah, she's going through possession, but you've hated her. So it was like he kind of just took on this responsibility as like, I have to solve this. And then he was neglecting the use to go to Willem Dafoe for like the first half of the movie. And then they finally go to him. But yeah, I don't know if his character was misogynistic, but it wasn't, at least shaped
like, out to be, but it wasn't actually performed
wasn't
that
like
way.
Outward like performative in that way. So the most of his character gave me prim and proper like man of the house. That's how I interpreted it. So maybe there was like a muddled area that wasn't working for you.
For sure. Yeah.
That's what I thought. That's what I took away from, because I felt the same way, that he just was the weakest link, but I think it was just a miscast, honestly. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's
Maybe
just
he
overrated,
just
like
like
Vinny
maybe he
says.
just found his dialect like appeasing to the time period or something, and then went with him. But another big part that we all want to talk about, and Vinny, we've talked about this on a lot of podcasts, is just cinematography and design elements. There was never a moment in this movie where I wasn't completely immersed in the dark nature of the castle or the town, the shadows going over the town, the plague hitting the town, like just being set in the early 1830s and 40s. What does that look like? And then how can they manipulate the dark atmosphere into these towns? Like all of the alleyways are in darkness or going into different corners. Nosferatu, the original movie, is like a cornerstone for filmmakers to look at and interpret. And it's like the German expressionist movement where there were big art pieces in different parts of the world coming out. So
Yeah.
that was a big like thing that has had its influence on movies since they began, basically. And Eggers uses that to manipulate our senses. And I loved just how long they put off showing Nosferatu and like his full form, or you only see sides of his face. We're not seeing his full shape. Like even the mustache thing, I was like, oh, like halfway
You're
through the
like,
movie,
oh,
he has
wow.
a mustache. I was like, I didn't know that. And so they like really made this ominous environment work for the story. And I love every part of that. And Liz, you were also saying too, this is definitely my like top 3 best shot movies of the year.
Yeah,
Like,
technically,
insane.
it's
Yeah.
gorgeous. Even like the sound element and the editing.
Mhm.
Usually, if I notice editing, it kind of bothers me. But when I noticed it in this film, I was like, oh my God, it's just beautifully timed. All of the jump scares, it's not cheesiness. It's like they're actually timed really well to show us just quick glimpses, but not enough for people to almost fully like understand what's happening, because even the characters don't understand fully what's happening at times. Something that I've thought was interesting too was the 1920s Nosferatu. It's also it's named Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror, which I think is really interesting because sometimes it did feel like just a beautiful symphony of like sound, editing, and photography like coming together to create this beautiful piece of art, which is so funny that it's also a horror film and it's just so beautifully done. Which is like a whole other conversation of horror can be beautiful and like it can be very artistic in its ways, and sometimes even more artistic than just a regular comedy or drama. But yeah, I think that this is my number one, maybe number one. I just can't think of another film this year that has had this well of a tech team, and just the artistic choices are on another level.
Yeah. I adored it. He's collaborated with cinematographer Joran Blanchke on almost all of his films.
Has he really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And again, they deliver. I think despite the Northman's flaws, it's a beautiful film.
Yeah.
And even the Lighthouse is so gorgeous. And again, like they deliver. It's so literally ripped straight out of like a gothic fairy tale book. Some of these shots. My favorite was when Nicholas Hoult was at the crossroads.
Oh yeah,
and
snow is falling down.
So good. Yeah,
it is incredible. I genuinely don't know how they were able to craft some of these images. Their use of CG too is so little but so perfect. Like I watched an interview with Eggers explaining that the shot of the hand going over the city, that's actually all CG.
Oh, miniature, right? Isn't it?
No.
Oh, it's CG?
Yeah, it's CG
wow.
actually.
Wow.
Wes Anderson thought it was a miniature.
Wow.
And
I thought it was too, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like it. It looks like it because of
does.
how well done it is. And Zach, how you mentioned how there's so many creative uses of like shadows wrapping around the corners, and I can't even explain it. It's so I want to see the behind the scenes because again, in that same interview, Eggers was talking about how they rehearsed crafting all these like very complex shadows for weeks on end before they even shot it. Like even the opening scene when you see his shadow in the curtains.
Oh, that was
but
like
he's
one
not
of my
there.
favorites too.
Yeah, it's insane. It is insane. So.
And I think that's like when best cinematography and design is at its peak. When it's almost invisible, but it adds so much complexity to the story. It shouldn't call attention to itself, but it only immerses you more in the narrative in that kind of fashion. But
I think that's also he also just like allows for the shots to sit slightly longer than I think other filmmakers allow it usually. Just to be like, look at how gorgeous this is, guys. Like, come on, appreciate it. Especially like one of my favorite shots was in the beginning when she actually like early in the beginning when she's coming out of the home and is like walking down the stairs in her nightgown. I was like, this is a painting right now. This is gorgeous. And correct me if I'm wrong too, Vinny. A lot of these shots are almost replicas or like remakes from the other Nosferatus, right? Aren't there like iconic images that he was trying to replicate?
Yeah, there are. It's not like 1-to-1, but there is a lot of
similar
akinness, or I don't even know if that's a real word, but it's very akin. You know, the use of. I know Zach mentioned how German Expressionism used these grand shadows and just very contrasty type of images and really playing to that. I mean, one of the most famous shots from the original is him going up the stairs to Helen's bedroom and you just see his shadow
in the doorway, right? Oh, and that too. Yeah, and when he's standing in the doorway, and he's like coming in, you see his face for the first time, and that was like horrific for the time period, you know. So there's a lot of references to the original.
What did you guys think of? I want to talk about the script a little bit.
Yeah.
Did we like the pacing? Did we think it was a little slow? Because sometimes I think Eggers, his pacing can be very tough sometimes. At least for me in The Lighthouse and The Witch, it was very like, sometimes I was like, all right, let's keep this going. This is one of my favorite films of his because I think pacing wise, he kept it pretty on point. But what were your thoughts on like the script? Did we like overall arcs? What were your thoughts?
I think it was, I think it's more contemporary of all of his other movies. The Witch is probably like right there with it, but because it has a clear villain, it has a clear setup of, okay, villain is possessing this girl, the villain wants to kill anything in his path, and then he comes to the village, and there has to be a resolution at some point. Either somebody has to die or we have to kill the villain. So that was like a very structured version. Lighthouse is like based off of some Lighthouse Keeper's works, which is not exactly, it's a lot of what he did was fictional for that movie, which is great, but there was so many points in that movie I'm like, I don't know how that's going to end. And even with Northman, there's a lot of history in that, but there was a lot that he takes on in surreal aspects, and he goes between like real contemporary structure and then, okay, let's have trippy visions and that kind of thing. But this one has, I feel like, a good balance of both. And you have like heroes trying to defeat the villain. So the structure I felt like was pretty seamless. Kind of what you were saying with what he likes to do with editing is he holds on his shots more, and his cuts feel more intentional than a lot of other movies coming out right now. Is some filmmakers just shoot for coverage and they just want to, okay, reverse shot, reverse. But he has a reason behind his structure and what's in the frame and what's out, and why we should be seeing this reaction and not cutting to someone else. Like there was even the point where Willem is at the bedside of Lily the first time that he meets her. He's like, tell me about all these visions. And it's hanging on Willem for a long time because you're seeing him process the severity of the situation. He's like, oh, this is the real thing that I've seen before, because he says that. And this is a big problem. This is not just a normal encounter. So he manipulates our senses in a lot of different ways. So if people aren't familiar with his style, it might feel a little slow. There are points where it does feel a little slow just because he doesn't cut as much. I think if you cut a lot, it feels faster naturally to some people. And he decides to pace it out. I think the only middle part that was a little slow was kind of when Nosferatu's in the town. He's in the one manor that he wanted to get the estate. Like he's in the island after he gets from the ship, and he's like trying to do the bidding with that one insane man, and they're like, how do we get this girl? So there's like a little middle part that was like, okay, like let's get to the end. Which I think
that point was just to give the audience like plot progression and just trying to be like, okay, this is what needs to happen in order for the next sequence to occur. Vinny, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like pacing for me, I give it an excuse a lot of times. I do agree with you though. Like Edgar's, although I do love all his films, I think that is probably the weakest part, is that like his pacing is very, I think when it comes to the second act specifically, he kind of like dwindles a little bit.
He meanders.
He picks it back up. He goes running at the end. Right? So I think I agree with Zach. That moment specifically, because in the original, that middle part of the film, or the middle part of the story, the ship is so much more expanded upon. Like he is hunting these members while like his body is just literally in a box on the ship. And we see a little bit of it, like him like affecting them through the plague and, you know, them throwing the bodies overboard. But I thought, I don't know, maybe they did film that, but they cut it out for the sake of moving faster. There's also in the original, in the Dracula novel, they call him Renfield. I forget what they call him in Nosferatu, but essentially Orlok's servant, the man with the white hair and the sideburns. In the original,
Knock.
Knock. Yeah, thank you. He is chased through the town by the town folk as like a mob, as they're using him as a scapegoat. So I was curious on maybe why the change was there. I had no issues with the pacing though. I had no issues, but maybe if I really had a nitpick, in that middle area between like him getting to the boat to them in negotiating in the manor, there might have needed another story beat. Like there felt like there should have been another story beat there.
I didn't think it like necessarily hurt the film. Like I actually respect Eggers for doing a little longer paced films, because there are certain movies where I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna buckle up for this long process that he's going to take us on this journey. Like it's just different from a contemporary thing. So I actually appreciate movies for doing different things for that reason. And in this case, it still works for the movie. Like I didn't feel like there was a point where it's going off topic, you know, like there wasn't a side scene that I didn't feel like helped contribute to the story. Everything was very important to Nosferatu creating chaos and that kind of thing. But yeah, so I think the story structure was pretty sharp, like all around. Yeah. And then one more thing too I wanted to talk about and expand on was like the use of gore, and like this is not a Tarantino movie, you know? Like this is not, we're gonna throw blood in action and for the sake of it. Like it was very meticulous and planted when he was killing people, or when Lily was going through her possessions. It wasn't just bloody for a vampire movie because it was bloody. It wasn't 30 Days of Night. You know, it wasn't like 20 vampires killing people. Like it was very thought-provoking and terrifying because we're seeing less of it, and like how he kills people too. Yeah. So what did you guys think about that? Like that was pretty scary for me, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it also just makes sense that there's not an excess amount of blood pouring everywhere, because if you think about it, for a vampire, he wants the blood. He doesn't want it spilling and like pouring because he needs to ingest it. So I think it makes more sense that there isn't just like blood squirting out of everybody. And then I also mentioned this before that Defoe talked about how like the biting needed to happen directly to the heart, not necessarily in the neck, because the heart is where all the blood comes from. So then I guess it also just makes sense that if you're going to the source, like it's not gonna, like if you hit an artery in the neck, it could start squirting out everywhere. But I appreciated that it wasn't just like a gore fest. I really did love the shot though of Lily just having like the blood pouring out of her mouth. I think artistically it's gorgeous. I don't know if I necessarily understand why it's pouring out, like the reason for that shot of, or if it's just to show that she's being possessed and like the possession is like pouring out of her. I don't really know if I understand like the full reasoning for it, besides that it was a cool shot.
I think it could also be related, like maybe she was seeing herself as a vampire and just seeing blood come out of her mouth, and like there's the connection to Nosferatu. So there has to be some vampire element, I think, to it. Like Vinny, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it was honestly more of an aesthetic thing.
Right?
Yeah, because it happens so briefly. Like it's like cutting,
quick,
like
it's quick shots.
Going crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was more of an aesthetic thing. I thought it was really cool though. And I think it does provide into that idea that you said, Liz, of like it's like pouring out of her through all the ears and eyes and mouth, you know?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Okay, so 2 moments that were really terrifying to me. This is spoilers, and we've gotten this far, so you guys are in.
Yeah, if you're in still, you know the spoilers at this point.
So when Nicholas Hoult is at the castle in the beginning, and just the fact that he like woke up to him on top of him and like getting like sucked on his chest, I was like, oh, dude, no, that's freaky. And then what was really like terrifying was the girls were alluding to the kids, like they were alluding to the fact that a monster's gonna get us, and then you hear this commotion in the room, and then they break open the door, and he's just like munching on this girl's neck, and it was like, and then he just like drops her like a rack. I was like, oh, dude, he messed them up.
So actually, to comment on that, what I really loved about this film's use of violence is the fact that he is a monster in this film. You are not given a single bit of empathizing for this creature, right? Which is the Werner Herzog version kind of tries to implement this idea that it's a monster in pain, and he's living in this immortal shell of pain and misery, and he never asked to become this monster, but he must fulfill his bloodlust, right? But I honestly prefer this version because he's a demon. He's fucking everything up, right? Like he shouldn't get any empathy. Although I do appreciate the empathetic look into the character done in previous renditions, I think this one was just more like it was more horrific, and it added to that quote unquote sympathy of horror.
Yeah, like there was a build up every time he like chose his next victim, and there felt like a reason behind it, and it wasn't like he was in the room the whole time and then something happened, like he bit them, where it's kind of like common in vampire movies, and like there was stuff that was happening off screen, so I liked that. And then I also, another vampire element they didn't use too much was the sunlight thing until the very end, which I liked, was like, because a lot of those movies, you know, he's constantly cowering away from sunlight and like trying to like, oh my gosh, like this whole thing, and we already know that, and Eggers knows that that's a common trait, so he decided to save that weakness for the very end. So what did you guys also think about the ending, now that we're on that topic too?
I loved it. I was so happy that just like it was a finished ending with like just both of them dying. Like it was perfect for me. I would have been upset if somehow miraculously she just like was like, I'm okay, everybody, like you didn't take all my blood, like I'm alive. I would have been like, what was the point of all of this then, almost?
No, I'm in the same boat. I think the ending is incredible. I think the last shot is
him like laying on top of her, his like super
So
ugly,
nasty.
gross legs and body. I literally was like, ew, this is a nightmare. That thing on top of you.
I know. Well, and that was in the like manuscript book of like this vampire just like you know, doing it with you. and then it's like, and then, oh my God. Cause, and then he just starts like biting her and everything. And she's going, oh my God. It was like, oh shit. Like she's really a victim in this one. Like,
well, and it's interesting because when they first kind of, they talk about it as like a love story almost, or like a romance, which I did think that in the third act they were going to all of a sudden start implementing stories of like empathy for him, of like, okay, why did Ellen fall, like initially give herself to him when she was younger? So I thought they were going to go that route. And I just think it's like an interesting another level of like, was it love that she had when she was younger, or was it truly just like loneliness that she then found comfort in like having somebody there for her? And then also like the first scene is so traumatizing to watch. So then it's also the conversation of like, did she know what she was fully getting herself into? Or like, did he actually like assault her in a way to trap her in here? And I think that, I don't know, I just really love Lily's performance of also her character not fully knowing the answer along with the audience, and her feeling that inner pull of like, I'm infatuated with him and like interested in him, but also like he's a monster that is literally disgusting and a corpse. So, but like, why am I attracted to him in a way?
Yeah, because I felt like it was a blend between the attraction, but then by the end she's like, this guy's gonna be haunting me wherever I go, so I have to bait him in a certain way to get him, because he was doing those couple visions. He's like, do you consent to this? Do you want this? And like, he was like, do you want this marriage? So he like was asking for that afflicting relationship, and she was like, I can't do this. Like, they were looking the whole movie for a way to kill him without her or without her dying, and without her you know, or her, she cannot be possessed anymore, you know. So then by the end, Willem's like, no, he wants her, and we should let him get her because it's killing everyone. Like, this is kind of the problem. So that he kind of sets up Nicholas. He's like, no, we gotta let her go, man. Like,
well, because she started the whole thing, because that's the whole other element. It's not just like this random vampire that was just like, at least in this version of Nosferatu, it's not like he picked her up and was like, I want you. She called out to him when she's younger, and she was like, I want this, like, please, please, please. And so she kind of started this whole thing. It wasn't like he asked for it. But I don't know. I thought it was really complicated and so many different levels to the story, and I just really loved it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's just incredible through and through. I mean, I really only had a couple nitpicks, but other than that, like the ending, that blend of romance within the film and the commentary of love within this such horrific fairy tale, if you could even call it that, you know, is incredible. It's really incredible to watch, and I'm excited for Eggers' next film, which is a medieval piece about a knight.
Dude, I'm so pumped for that.
I'm very curious what it's gonna be like. So
his work is always gonna be like some of my favorite. Do you guys want to go into scores?
Let's go into scores. Vinny, you want to go first?
I can start. I basically just summed up my thoughts. You know, I have a few nitpicks, but other than that, like, I'm gonna be rewatching this soon. I might go to the theater again. Yeah, it was cool, and I'm giving this a solid 9 out of 10. Yeah,
nice.
Cool.
I really loved this film. I was a little surprised on how much I actually liked it. I was hyped for it, but again, I feel like this is a film that I could rewatch a few more times and get a lot more out of it. And it's my favorite technically, so I'm giving it a 9.5.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna match you with a 9.5.
Wow.
Because I kind of agree with like what everything you guys have said. Like, start to finish, this is just a very complete movie. Everything is firing on all cylinders. This year has had maybe a handful of those movies where everything has been good, and I think that this will probably be in most people's top 10 lists. I think, unless you don't like the genre, but I think it's in the conversation for his strongest film too. And it's got a lot going for it, everything that we just talked about. So Yeah, I'm excited. I hope it gets Oscar recognition.
I don't know if it will.
I know, like
I don't know.
the horror genre does not get the appreciation it deserves, but this year it should, like with the horror that has come out. So this is a front runner for me for that like award category. But if it doesn't, stands alone. I love it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any more final thoughts before we sign off?
No, that
good?
was it.
Yeah, not really.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for staying involved with our review this whole time. We really appreciate all the support that we've gotten so far. We are 25 subscribers away from 500 subscribers. And when we get there, we get to monetize our content. It gets us to keep doing reviews, keep doing podcasts, more film festival coverage. And that's all in the future coming up. 2025 is going to be a big year for us. So we really appreciate all the support that has come so far. All of our handles, we're on TikTok, Instagram, Cinema Wave Media _ Culture Wave Media. We really appreciate all the support. And just signing off, I am Zach Miller.
I am Liz Seiko.
And I am Vinny Albano.
We'll see you next time.
This is The Culture.